Watch this now. Negroes are so Americanized that were it not for their color, one would forget that they ever came from Africa. Now watch this. The Falashas, or black Jews of Ethiopia, are probably very ancient. They claim lineal descent from Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Call themselves Beta Israel, which means the chosen people, and observe the Passover. End of quote. In Sex and Race, Volume 1, page 28, Mr. Rogers says, and I quote, increasingly, it is being said in the most informed scientific circles that the Negro was the ancestor of the human race. Henry Fairfield Osborn, late head of the American Museum of Natural History, who undoubtedly was a black man, head of the American Museum of Natural History, who had himself a strong tinge of white fanaticism, said, Negroid stock is even more ancient than Caucasian or Mongolian man. Henry Fairfield Osborn was a white man. Rogers continues, Professor W.K. Gregory, in the illustrated front piece of his book, entitled, and I quote, Our Face from Fish to Man, end of quote, gives the Tasmanian Negro as the first man. Rene Verneau, head of the Paleontological Institute of Paris, says, and I quote, recent discoveries seem to indicate that the Negro element preceded the white and the yellow everywhere, end of quote. From, and I quote, Huxley Memorial Lectures for 1924. See, this stuff, they've been knowing about this stuff. You didn't get none of this in school. They didn't tell the black folk about it, and they didn't tell the white folks about it. 1924. Huxley Memorial Lecture for 1924 on page 20. Rogers, see, Rogers is a historian, so he's putting all these different things together. All this is in his book, but he's quoting from other authorities and authors, so that's why I'm trying to keep all this together. Huxley Memorial Lectures for 1924, page 20, Rogers continues, and I quote, Griffith Taylor adds in support that the Negritos, or little Negroes, were the first in Europe. After the Neanderthal, a near-human Negroid type, and that the Negritos introduced their culture all over the world. The original color of primitive man was black. Going on to quote Herodotus. Still, the Egyptians said that they believed the Colchians to be descended from the army of Sesostris. My own conjectures were founded first, get this now, first on the fact that they are black-skinned and have woolly hair, which certainly amounts to but little, since several other nations are so too. But I further and more especially on the circumstance that the Colchians, the Egyptians, and the Ethiopians are the only nations who have practiced circumcision from the earliest times. In his book entitled, that's the end of quote. In his book entitled From Superman to Man by J.A. Rogers, copyright 1968 by Helga M. Rogers, page 18 and 19, historian J.A. Rogers says, Aristotle, in his Physiognomy, chapter 6, distinctly mentions the Ethiopians as having woolly hair and the Egyptians as being black-skinned. Now, every movie you have seen about Egypt, Pharaoh, dogs and the cats are all white. The only time you see a black is when he's a slave. Rogers goes on to say, and I quote, Count M.C. de Volney, author of The Ruins of Empire, says, the ancient Egyptians were real Negroes of the same species as the other present natives of Africa. End of quote. De Volney further states in the same work, says Rogers, quoting again, to the race of Negroes, oh, watch this now, to the race, now this de Volney was a Frenchman. So he'd be classified as white. Okay, now watch this now. And I'm quoting, "To the race of Negroes, the object of our extreme contempt, we owe our arts, sciences, and even the very use of speech." End of quote. In an article in the Washington Post, another Negro-owned and operated publication, the Washington Post, copyright 1994, the Washington Post, November 16, 1994, Wednesday, final edition, byline by Boyce Rensberger, Washington Post staff writer, I quote, "The overwhelming conclusion of anthropologists, in short, is that no physical features distinguish any race, not even a combination of traits that will do the job. We all descended from black people. Bye. We walk by faith, not by sight."